We last left off on checks and balances. So one more example I wanted to give you was a law example. So Congress makes our laws, and when they make the law, the president is going to sign it into law. So they've created a bill. It's a really good bill. They think it's awesome for you and me. They pass it up to the president. When the president gets it, he can or she can sign it into law. They can veto it, but let's say they signed it into law. So when the president signed it into law, you and I kind of feel that that law is weird. Maybe it's not legal. Maybe when we're reading it, we feel that they really can't enforce it. So you and I challenge it. We can challenge it in the courts. And it could be when you challenge it, it goes all the way up to the Supreme Court. When the court gets the case, they're going to determine whether that law that these two branches thought was good is constitutional or unconstitutional. If they feel that the law is unconstitutional, they're going to kick out that law. It's going to be thrown out, even though Congress and the president thought it was good enough. So this is what ends up happening when you look at checks and balances. There's so many little things built within this that you really do see a government that has a lot of breaks, a lot of safety proceedings. Okay. The next principle is a massive one, and it is hard. Federalism. Federalism is the sharing and dividing of power among levels of government, national, state, and local. The federal government is huge, but it doesn't do everything. Okay? So it shares the power, the burden of governing this country with state governments, and it shares it with local governments too. For the most part, the people who do your day-to-day law enforcement is going to be your local government, your city, your county. The federal government, though, also does law enforcement. It's just that they don't do most of the law enforcement. The things they do would be like bigger picture stuff that crosses state lines. So, kidnapping, taking a child illegally, most of the time when somebody kidnaps a child, they take them across state lines. Well, the federal government gets involved in that. Okay? But most of and that's a criminal thing. Most of the day-to-day criminal laws are really going to be in a local government situation. Your sheriff or your police department would be doing it. So the government is doing that on purpose. This makes it easier for you and me to operate and have a government that works. There's two theories on federalism. There's dual federalism, or layered cake, and then there's marble cake federalism, or kind of cooperative federalism. This is old school, like the dual federalism, the layered cake. It's kind of like Civil War time before that. The federal government did its thing, states governments, they did their thing, and they worked independently of each other. They did not work together. What you and I have always kind of known is more of a marble cake. It's that blending and sharing of responsibilities. So what we have today is more where the federal government and the state governments work together to help you and me and get us what we need done or accomplished. Okay. So I don't really care if you really understand like the cake thing, but I just wanted to give you the example of it's not really so much the old school where, hey, federal government, this is us, this is you. It's more of they work together to get us the better government, the government that really is going to be very responsive to our needs. So some powers that only the federal government does would be like delegated, enumerated, express powers. These are powers that the federal government says, look, we're not sharing those with you, the state. And that's good because like one of those examples would be like the power to declare war. So only the federal government has the power of delegated, enumerated, express powers. Those are actually written in the Constitution. There are some things that are just for the state governments. So this is kind of like that dual kind of approach. So when you look at some things that only the state governments do, would be like education. Yes, the federal government makes rules on education. They give money, but they don't make your day-to-day education stuff. I get Common Core and No Child Left Behind and stuff, but that was just federal standards on what they wanted to see in education. Most of your day-to-day education laws are created by your state. So like the state of North Carolina has so many credit hours you have to have in order to graduate in the state. They set up what courses you have to take. So like you're taking American history, founding principles of civics and economics. That's a requirement. That's a requirement only in this state. If you went to South Carolina, they have a government class and they have an economics class. So they've actually broken this course up into two different courses. So reserve powers are anything that is not mentioned in the United States Constitution for the federal government is going to go to the states. And we're going to look more at these powers soon. It's just to kind of give you a heads up. This is all part of federalism. Another part of federalism would be concurrent powers. So these are powers that are shared and shared between the state and the federal government. So a good example would be the power of the tax. You pay federal income tax and you pay state income tax. That is concurrent. You get hit twice on the same paycheck. But you get taxed by the national government, federal, and you get taxed by your state government on your income. But the local government also shares the power of taxing you. So you pay income tax to state and national government, but you pay like local taxes like property tax. You even pay a sales tax that's a little bit higher in your county, your city, but you also pay a sales tax to the state. So all these different levels have the power to tax you. That would be concurrent. They're sharing those powers. Delegated powers are listed in the Constitution, and it's listed in Congress's powers. It actually is written what they can do. So this chart is a really good chart to help you understand. This is the delegated, enumerated, express powers. These are the powers that only the federal government can do. These are reserve powers. These are things that only the state governments can do. Here would be our concurrent power. Here are shared powers. Okay. Here are things that both federal and state can share. So when you look at this, it kind of helps you understand like who's in charge of what. So things that the U.S. government's in charge of right here, like the United States Post Office or the postal system, making our money, coining our money, creating the money. That's only going to be a federal government power. But like states, like establishing your local governments, maintaining schools, and that's why taxes are going, a lot of your state taxes go to your schools. So this is what you're looking at with only what the states can do. Now they share some things, like they both can borrow money. So states can borrow money, so can the federal government. They both can put taxes on you and me. Federalism continued. Like, there are things that are what we call implied powers, and these are complicated. But implied powers are only things that you can get from delegated powers. So there has to be a delegated power, one of those powers right here. And then what you do with implied powers is you siphon off power from that, okay? So that is how they get a implied power. So it's not anything you want to do, it's not anything you want to create, but implied powers are going to help the country, the government, change to our different needs as time goes on. So implied powers really refers to our elastic clause, are necessary and proper clause. So I give you an example of how implied powers work. When you look at this chart right here, it says that they can coin money, that they can make money. That's a federal government thing. Well, when you think about coining money, where do you put your money? You put it in a bank. Okay. Now that you know, hey, we've got to put money in a bank, the federal government created a bank. And so you guys study that in your American history class. You studied the Bank of the United States, and it was a very controversial thing, but it was an implied power. Like, the government has the power to coin money. They have the power to make money. So now that they can create, they can make our money. Well, anything that they can siphon off of that, anything that they can like draw those little like spider webs that you used to do with a word when you're in elementary school and stuff, that is how they do implied powers. They can't do anything they want. It has to be connected to a power that they have listed in the Constitution. Okay, so it's not anything that they can think of. It's not like they make a wish. It's just that they can only do it based off a actual written power. Okay. The next power of the United States Constitution, another one of our principles, is flexibility. So flexibility is making the United States Constitution a living document. So when you're making the United States Constitution a living document, you are giving it away for it to change. We talked about Article 5, keep it alive. So Article 5 lays out the way to amend the United States Constitution. It tells you how you can change it. And so we do that through amendments. So here's the amendment process. So we can formally change the United States Constitution with an amendment. And it's happened 27 times. 27 times we formally have changed the Constitution. We felt that we didn't do it right the first time around, so we've changed it. We went through this process, okay? You can informally change the Constitution as well, and this is really mostly how we do it. So this could be through court rulings, like the Supreme Court. So judicial decisions, court rulings. Like, how do you read an amendment? How do you read the law? Okay? How they used to read, the freedom of speech and how we read that today is different. Freedom of speech used to just be words. It used to be verbal. Now we look at freedom of speech as the years have progressed as like nonverbal things, like gestures, things that like maybe you're wearing as your clothes. So we've looked at how we interpret that word speech and we've changed it. Okay. Another way you can change the Constitution, like how we read it, is through executive orders. So presidents issue executive orders so they can make something carry out like it's law. Those are informal ways to change the Constitution. But this flexibility, us being able to amend it, having the way we read something, like with a court ruling or an executive order, we have a government document that has the ability to carry out what it needs to. And so this is also talking about that elastic clause, that necessary and proper clause. It gives our government, Congress, the ability to make laws that are needed for carrying out its jobs and its responsibilities over time. When you think about the government originally, they didn't think of the government doing the stuff that it does today, like establishing minimum wage. The government a long time ago didn't think of it like that. But then as the years went on, we said, you know what, maybe the federal government needs to establish a minimum wage. So they connected it to the document. And now that they talked about, the well-being of the American people, they've connected it. They decided that they were going to make the minimum wage a certain amount. And over the years, the federal government has increased it. States have to follow that. They can make it higher. They cannot make it lower. But that was the government being able to adjust for you and me as time has gone on. Like they adjusted what we needed it. So making the Constitution a living document is why we've had the Constitution for over 200 years. We have been able to change it. It is not inflexible like the Articles were. So it's a better document than the articles.